To start us off are two folks who have graced our stage on a variety of occasions and are good friends of NCG and our corporate community. They're here to share their visions and hopes for their cities, as well as what they're trying to achieve today. Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf and San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo. They will be in conversation with another person you all know, my longtime friend and colleague, Nicole Taylor, President and CEO of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole for today's really important conversation. Nicole?
Thank you, Steve. It is a pleasure to be joining you at this year's Corporate Philanthropy Institute. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. If at any point during the conversation you have questions for our panelists, please drop them in the Q&A box. I'll do my best to integrate your questions into the discussion. So now, as we all navigate the uncertainties of this ongoing pandemic, this is our opportunity to advance systemic change for our communities and tackle the issues that have plagued our country for generations. At the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, we're asking ourselves the same question. How do we help ensure that we collectively build back better and that no one is left behind when we emerge from all of this? For us, we believe that we are living in a significant moment, a window of opportunity to push for a bold equity and racial justice agenda and ensure that every person in the Bay Area can lead safe, fulfilling, and financially secure lives. Today, it is my honor to moderate a discussion with the mayors of two of the largest cities in the Bay Area who will tackle this question at the city level. And I'm really excited because I've had the pleasure of working with both of them over the years. They will discuss the impact of multiple pandemics on their cities in our state, how their cities are looking at an equitable recovery, and what they need to address the health, economic, and social justice consequences of everything we have faced over the past 20 plus months. The mayors will also provide their perspectives on the role companies can play to address the issues our communities face and the key priorities our communities are trying to advance. So please join me in welcoming Mayor Libby Schaaf of the City of Oakland and Mayor Sam Liccardo of the City of San Jose. Welcome, welcome, welcome to both of you, and so excited to be here with you. So let's get down to business. As you both work to recover from these multiple pandemic crises, how are you thinking about building back better and a new normal centered on equity? And as you answer, think about this audience. How can they help? They're really interested in knowing how the corporate community can step up. How can they can partner and invest? So Libby, let's start with you, Mayor Schaaf.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. It's so great to be with all of you, even though, yes, it's on Zoom once again, but I think we can actually connect more further because of this technology, which I know Sam is proud is based in San Jose. So, you know, we've learned a lot from this pandemic, and shame on us if we don't remember these lessons. One, it showed that government actually can move fast when given permission to. And so I would say to you all, give us permission to be a little janky sometimes, as I like to say. Sam, you know, as you gave a brilliant quote once, and I really remembered it, which was, government is not in the risk-taking business. And we need to be. And that's where private partnerships can play a unique role. One, giving us the political cover to experiment or try new things. And two, funding pilots, demonstrations, and the evaluations that actually support policy adoption. I once heard a quote that I thought was brilliant, that we are program rich and systems poor. What I mean by that is we have a lot of great programs and companies support many of them. But are these programs actually leading to systemic change? Because if there's one thing that we learned from this pandemic, it's time to go big. It is time to stop nibbling around the edges of inequality and inequity, two slightly different things. It is time for us to do systems change, transform these systems. And government was really not designed to make big, scary changes. We need that political support, and we need your support with actually funding the demonstrations that make the case. So please don't just invest in programs. Make sure those programs are pilots with a path to permanence, a path to being sustained and institutionalized. And I can just give tons of examples of how that has worked in Oakland. Everything from our cabin community model, which Oakland was the first city to try this as a new form of shelter. It's now all over the state. It wouldn't have happened but for Kaiser Permanente, Sutter Health, Home Depot, Target, I believe, all these companies that invested in our first 2 demonstration projects that actually proved this works. And now it's institutionalized. It's the way we all now think about sheltering our homeless. Our Keep Oakland Housed program, and I hope I get a chance to talk about it a little more later, to prevent homelessness, started with companies, private sector, philanthropy, creating this model. And my goodness, did we need it when the pandemic hit. So that is the general thing. Think big, give us permission to take risks, and you play a critical role in that.
Yeah. Okay, Sam. Mayor Liccardo.
Well, I'm not going to top that. Let me do a great job of saying all the things that any mayor should say in this situation. So I'm all for, and certainly some fantastic pilots that Oakland's launched under Libby's leadership. I guess I would offer this. I think that, certainly as we think about equity in particular, I think that was a key word in your question, Nicole. We've been all reckoning with a history of racial discrimination in this country over the last several months in ways that we hadn't before. And that is healthy, and we need to do much more of it, undoubtedly. It seems to me, though, that if we're pushing for solutions and we really want to tackle, how do we significantly narrow and eliminate this equity gap we have, racially, economically, et cetera. You think about some of the awful statistics statewide that for a typical Latino or Black student in our state, they are 3 times less likely to go to college if they're similarly situated in high school. That is, it seems to me, at the heart of all of this. It has got to be about economic opportunity, and that necessarily means education and skills. And so that's where we're really doubling down on, really on trying to find ways to innovatively expand opportunity for education skills that will lead to economic opportunity. So, certainly, Libby did a great job with the College Promise. It's an amazing program in Oakland. We started something similar, and then we took a slightly different twist. And I think it's good. We should have a lot of variations out there and try different things and see what works. San Jose aspires as a model where we recognize that a huge percentage of our students were not getting well informed about how to get to college from their very first year in high school. And we know that the majority of our high school students in public schools don't have college-educated parents. They're getting on average about 12 minutes of college counseling in their 4 years of high school, if they're like any average California public school student. So they're simply not getting information they need. We also know financial barriers are huge as well for a lot of our students. So we created a digital platform that would provide students from their very first week in high school the pathway with decisions they can make every single month that can help them get to college, about what courses they take, after school activities, what jobs, all of the things that they can do, and they earn scholar dollars as part of that. And at the end of their 4 years, those scholar dollars become real dollars. And we don't believe it's an incentive. We believe it's a signpost that kids simply need more information. We need to gamify this effort. And fortunately, we had enormous support from a lot of folks in the tech community, philanthropic community. Thank you, James Higa, for jumping in early. And we've raised more than $8 million now. We've got 1,100 kids who are overwhelmingly from low-income families. I think we're more than 90%, and far more than 90% are students of color. These are the students we want to get into college and beyond. And it's investments like that. So certainly digital inclusion initiatives I know exist in every city, but certainly in ours, we're really proud of the fact that we're able to get, in just a year and a half, 100,000 residents access to free Wi-Fi using community Wi-Fi, and 60,000 students with devices, and so that they can learn. We know that is a huge barrier for far too many students, and certainly for their families. And then we've launched an initiative called Resilience Corps, where we use some federal money to really enable hundreds of our young adults in our least affluent neighborhoods. These are overwhelmingly 93% low-income young people of color, and get them jobs, boosting the resilience of our city in various ways. We need it in so many ways, right? We've got climate change, we're dealing with drought, we're dealing with forest fire mitigation. Yes, even in big cities like San Jose, we have to clear defensible space. We're helping students with learning loss. We're addressing drought, a whole host of different mitigations. And these young people are tutoring kids. They're helping us reduce our water consumption in various ways, all the things we need to do to make our city more resilient. They're getting skills, and we'd love to have philanthropic help to help us understand how we can create real pathways beyond the 2 years or 1 year that we may have them employed.
Right. I'm hearing the theme of how corporate philanthropy, really corporate investment, can help, again, come alongside what the cities are doing and what your priorities are. I know we hear from companies all the time, what are the priorities of the public sector, and where can they, add value to what you're trying to do. And I hear both cities that there are these pilots, there are these discrete efforts that companies can come alongside and invest in, and that's the path to more sustainability and more, growth of equity in both your cities. So thank you for that. I am, Sam, you mentioned the federal government money. One of the questions that comes up for us as we, go out and try to raise capital from companies and to invest in our local communities here is, how are you actually deploying recovery resources from the federal or state government? And is there a role that the private sector can play in that, particularly given what we hear in the media, that the dollars aren't even getting deployed? The example of the rent relief dollars that still haven't been dispersed to renters. So, how can they help? How can the private sector help? But first, how are you deploying these resources, and is there a role for the private sector?
Well, a large portion of these resources are really just helping our residents hang on in different ways. And certainly we've been blessed with a lot of generous support from the private sector in helping to provide, rent payments for folks who are critically needing to stay housed, particularly since we know the eviction moratorium has now expired. So the good news is we do actually have money. We got to do a better job of distributing it, I think, as a state and getting to people in need. We're using a lot of money for food and things like that. I think as I consider about private sector engagement, there's a lot of one-time uses that we're starting to pilot in different ways because we have these resources that we never had before. For example, we're launching significant initiative this fall around childcare, a huge barrier, we know, for so many low-income families, particularly single moms who are trying to get back into the workforce. And we would love to have support in a host of ways, including if folks have space where we can engage in very low-cost leases to get childcare providers up and running, as long as they have access. There's a lot of requirements we know in how the spaces get built out, but as long as we can get access to outdoor space and so forth, we'd love to be able to use your corporate campus. We'd love to be able to use your storefront.
Yeah.
I mentioned the work we're doing with hundreds of young people through the Resilience Corps. We'd love to get internships for these young people when they're done with our work. We'd love to help provide them with skills. If you're out there training a workforce in digital skills, can we get some of our young people into those workshops?
Right.
And as we think about how we're deploying to address our homelessness, which I think is, I'm sure Libby would agree, is our greatest crisis. We've launched an effort around quick build apartments that I think is really taking hold, and we're getting hundreds of unhoused residents off the street, and we're building at a small fraction of what it costs to build a typical apartment complex using prefabricated materials at $100,000 a unit rather than $800,000, and we're building in 4 months rather than 4 years. And we want to see this accelerate. We need sites to be able to do it, so certainly land is critical. If you've got a vacant parking lot that isn't getting well used right now, we know there's a lot of those. We'll lease you with it. We'd love to find more room. And we'd also love more engagement in the private sector around helping everything from employment to services. We do have work-ready unhoused residents, and we got work programs that they're engaged in, for example, cleaning up our city and so forth. We want to give them higher level skills so they can really get back on their feet.
Okay. Libby, what do you think in terms of how are you deploying these resources with federal government, and what role can the private sector play?
Well, let me just be clear that most of the ARPA funds, American Rescue Act funds we got, literally just let us keep the lights on because our revenues were severely impacted by this pandemic as well.
Right.
But I'm really proud, Oakland has already deployed 70% of our rent relief money, and we have 600 and counting applications pending as I speak. And that is because of the private sector partnership. So because the private sector worked with us 3 years ago to launch Keep Oakland Housed, and we started this partnership that really dug into how do we prevent homelessness from happening before it starts. We were able to build a network and an ecosystem of community-based providers. We were able to perfect the system of really understanding how to find the people that were literally about to fall into homelessness and the type of flexible aid they needed. In 3 years, this pilot actually kept just under 6,000 Oakland households from becoming homeless, and the average cost per household was $3,800. Talk about a return on investment. Now, the success of that pilot made us completely ready when all that rent relief money came from the federal government. We already had a system set up. We were ready to receive those funds and make a slight pivot to comply with the federal regulations and deploy that money immediately. And I think that's why a recent Chronicle analysis showed that Oakland actually had been the most efficient with rent relief dollars. But it's thanks to the fact that we had that private sector partnership before the pandemic happened that we were able to respond so quickly and effectively. So perfect example.
Right.
And I want to just highlight one upcoming opportunity because I know, we need to think forward. It's not just the federal government that has deployed all this pandemic relief money. I really have to sing the praises of Mayor Sam Liccardo, who has headed up the Big 13, the Big City Mayors Coalition, that really deserves credit for at least a portion of that $12 billion that the state of California has made available to address homelessness. Now, the home key money is specific to purchasing existing buildings. It can be big hotels. In Oakland, we've actually created a network of single family homes that are shared housing for seniors. It's just a beautiful program. But the money is mostly for the capital cost, and we need operational subsidies. And so here's where a private company or a philanthropy that is willing to put up that capital reserve, that operating reserve, could help Oakland and San Jose get more home key money awarded to our cities and actually make this program more effective. It really is this moment that your investments can help us leverage more of this recovery money for our community and make sure that it's actually successful and impactful for the long term. So home key is another opportunity that is coming up, but that is just ripe for amazing partnership.
And
Nicole, can I build on something that Libby just said? Because I think it's super important. I mean, there's a lot of innovation happening right now in Oakland, San Jose, and lots of cities around how we're going to address homelessness, right? It's cabin communities, quick build apartments, motel conversions, et cetera. What we are all learning is it's incredibly expensive to operate these communities. And there are real strains in the nonprofit sector and just a lack of labor to be able to provide the basic services and so forth. And so, with the help of San Francisco Foundation, one thing we're looking at now with consulting help is to try to figure out how can we get the residents engaged and actually employ them in providing maintenance, in providing security, in providing some management, all the kinds of things that we know, transportation, for example, driving shuttles. Are there ways in which we can empower people and also reduce the extraordinary costs, because we have to scale all these projects, as we know we're not doing nearly enough and we need to keep doing more. And so I think there could be a lot of room for private sector innovation in helping us figure out how can we run these more cost effectively and actually engage the residents with dignity.
Right. So how do the companies actually invest? Like, who are the key lead partners that they should be connecting with? You know, is it somebody in your office? Are there key nonprofits that you know, as we're talking about the home key and we're talking about, you know, housing specifically because of the, you know, we're still digging our way out, right, of the housing crisis.
Well, I'll say, you know, anyone who wants to invest in innovation in Oakland, I will make time for you personally as the mayor.
She will. She will, believe me. She will.
Yeah, I've even driven down to your office, Nicole.
You have, I know. Yes.
So
Yes.
you can certainly feel free. I'm sure I would speak for Sam too. You know, if you can't find us directly, Nicole knows how to find us. We both have amazing chief of staffs, you know, but start with us because we are like super connectors. Whatever your interest is, whatever your passion is, we can connect it both to the sustainability model, like how does it fit into the public system? So this is not just a program, it is systems change. And then who are the nonprofit partners in the community that have the capacity to actually get the thing up and running in the fastest amount of time. And let me just throw in one other opportunity. And Sam, I know this is a passion of yours as well. There's a lot of, in this relief package, state money, and let's like knock on wood, it's looking very promising for a historical amount of federal money to really address public broadband and the digital divide. Yeah. But we can have all the free Wi-Fi we want. We can even have all the free devices that we want. If people don't know how to use them, right, if they're not gaining digital literacy, those are just physical assets that are sitting there without use. So again, this is an amazing opportunity to leverage an investment because the infrastructure, like the physical one-time investments, are getting made right now. But we have to invest in the human use, the adaptation. And that's an amazing opportunity. I mean, in Oakland, we were blessed. Part of what made Oakland Undivided so successful is we had a nonprofit called Tech Exchange, which provides in-home, culturally competent technical support in 25 different languages. And to be able to deploy these community-informed tech experts into people's homes to not just help kids keep doing their schoolwork on these, you know, new devices that we were able to secure. And again, Oakland took, you know, the city from 12% connected to 98% connected for our low-income schools, children, students. But also to teach the parents, here's how you can use the internet to find out where to get a free vaccination, where to get a free COVID test, to get your questions answered about the safety of the vaccine, to get help with free food or housing, or actually in Oakland, the eviction moratorium is not over. We had a different way that we passed it locally so that ours actually has survived the sunset of the state and federal moratoriums. But people wouldn't know that if they couldn't get online and find that resource. So this is another golden opportunity for the private sector to really leverage this one-time physical investment in equipment and infrastructure.
Great. Sam, how was the digital platform? There's a question related to all of this. How was the digital platform for the Dollars for College funded?
Yeah, thank you. First, we used federal money, one-time federal money, certainly for some of the hard infrastructure around the community Wi-Fi. And we've gotten about 100,000 residents connected that way. By the end of 2022, 300,000 residents throughout, particularly East San Jose, where we're most focused. So pretty good sized population, the size of a city of, say, St. Louis or Cincinnati. So that's important. In terms of the human infrastructure, I think Libby's dead on. You know, it's so critically important that we empower folks with skills, particularly seniors and parents who may be monolingual. And so we actually managed to be able to hit up our telecom companies who are deploying small cells with fees. This is before the FCC changed the rule under Trump, but we were able to hit them up for fees. They're contributing to a fund that we're also soliciting contributions for, and great companies like Zoom have already committed lots of dollars, and we're grateful for that. And we've got an army of more than a dozen CBOs that are out there. They're trusted community partners that are working with families in the appropriate language and with cultural sensitivity to ensure that parents, kids, everyone can get the skills they need to be able to use those devices and that connectivity. Because Libby's right, it's really a three-legged stool. You need to have the connectivity, you need to have the devices, and then you need to have the skills. And let me also just emphasize, like Libby, although her enthusiasm is impossible to match, I can tell you, for any mayor like myself, you'll need a restraining order. If you say that you're interested, I'll be at your doorstep. Thank you.
I know, it's true. It's true. So it was at ARPA funds that helped that funded the digital platform. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, we used a fair amount of that. We also had committed in years past a significant amount of city money and school district money. We were partnering with Eastside Union High School District. So that investment had been ongoing. We were continuing to make that investment. What put us over the top was the additional federal dollars.
Excellent, excellent. So I want to pivot now, talk about structural racism and social justice in that form. How has your work shifted in the aftermath of the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the countless other Black people who've been murdered at the hands of law enforcement? How have you been rethinking public safety and policing as a result? And what are you championing now, programs, systems change, and the path, the road ahead in this? It's been a difficult 20 months in both of your cities and prior, but particularly in the last 20 months. So it'd be great for this audience to know how are you thinking about it? What work is happening? So who'd like to?
Happy to jump in. I know there's a lot of work happening in every city right now on this, because this is a huge challenge for every big city.
Yes.
We formed an Office of Racial Equity before and got things rolling before the murder of George Floyd, and had been working, for example, for several years, and having already created Office of Immigrant Affairs and other kinds of institutions to try to build out the human infrastructure to be more responsive, because frankly, that's something where we've struggled for many, many years in the city. I think most of my energy has been focused, if we think about policing in particular, around reforming the disciplinary process, because I think this is not terribly sexy. It doesn't get a lot of people to show up in council meetings, but it's these very technical changes that make a huge difference. Right now, the overwhelming model in major city police departments is that police themselves. Investigations of misconduct are performed by internal affairs departments that are reportable to the chief. It seems to me we're long past the point now where Americans are willing to believe and trust that that's the best approach. And so taking an internal affairs department, or essentially taking investigations out of internal affairs department and putting them into separate agencies are really critical, not just oversight, but the actual investigations, because there's a big difference, of course. And that takes a lot of work and hard thinking, because it's not self-evident to anybody how you're going to have folks trained up, ready to go, understand policing, understand investigations, and are going to be able to do this well. And we're working on that very effort right now. We also know throughout the United States, and there's a Washington Post study that came out in 2017, it looked at 37 major cities and discovered that after police chiefs had terminated cops, had fired them, 450 cops in these 37 cities had gotten rehired, forced by decisions by arbitrators who are not accountable to the residents, to the police chief, to the city manager, to the council, to anybody, right? These are just arbitrators. And this is the way that police contracts work in nearly every major city. And so pushing hard on reforming that. These arbitrators make decisions that are not reviewable by any court. They're not even exposed to the public. The public doesn't even know why it is that a chief is told that they have to rehire a cop after they've been fired. In San Jose, we had a cop who was, putting out menacing tweets about Black Lives Matter. Eddie Garcia did the right thing. We fired him and we had to rehire him again because an arbitrator told us to. It's not right. And so it completely deflates everything you're trying to accomplish as a department. And I think good cops resent it too, because the last thing I want to see is bad cops in their department. So we've got to reform these. And this is certainly nationwide, but in our own city, we're working hard on that. We're working hard also on reimagining how we respond to police calls. We know that there are a lot of better ways. And we've been working on that with community service officers and mental health workers and so forth. That's not going to work in all situations, but we know it can certainly at least improve the relationship around public safety. And then I've been working a lot on gun harm reduction strategies and things that I know that are not necessarily directly aligned around racial equity issues, but more around public safety, because we know disproportionately it's our Black and brown communities that are really victimized by gun violence. So we're pushing hard to get an insurance mandate for gun ownership here, as well as a fee on gun ownership that will compensate cities for the cost of gun violence.
Wow, it's a lot. Thank you. Thank you for your efforts, Mayor. And Mayor Schaaf.
Yeah, no, Oakland has been so passionate about racial justice. It's part of our DNA. We're the proud birthplace of the Black Panthers. So let me be clear, we didn't need the murder of yet another Black man to wake us up to this problem.
Right.
What I did find inspirational is it felt like the rest of the country woke up, and the interest in investing in alternatives to law enforcement. The idea that we have to really double down, triple down, quadruple down on prevention and intervention, which is the part of the defund movement that I agree with. I don't agree with all of it, but that part I do agree with. That increased investment is certainly something that we saw more interest in. So, for example, before George Floyd was murdered by the state, we had started the process of creating what many cities are doing now, which is a non-police response option to 911 calls. Mm-hmm. In Oakland, we call it macro. But what was exciting is we actually got a $10 million grant from the state budget process this year to actually help us accelerate the move from a pilot or demonstration to a full-blown implementation. I will say a place where we're continuing to look for partnership as we, I agree with everything Sam said about police reform, so I'm just not going to repeat that. Oakland already had the strongest and most independent citizen police commission in the country that plays a direct role in officer discipline and even has a power to independently fire a police chief for cause. So that, is work Oakland was doing. I do want to highlight on policing. We have done some amazing work in partnership with Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt on the impact of implicit or subconscious bias in policing. And in Oakland, in just 4 years, we've reduced discretionary stops of African Americans by 70% because of new policies and procedures that we've put in place and trainings that she's provided. And this has all been under her guidance. So just huge hats off to
she's
her.
Great.
If you want a good read, she has a book out called Bias, and it's actually a good read, and it explains. And her philosophy is fantastic, because she's not saying like, "Hey, cops, you're all racist." She's saying, "Hey, we all have brains, and brains work a certain way, and this is how society has unfortunately taught our brains to work. And the good news is we can unteach them." Right. So just can't say enough about her.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's a good friend, and it's really amazing the work that she's been doing with the police there. There's a question that just came in related to this. How are you answering calls from the community to abolish the police? and reinvest those resources into transformative justice processes communities are already building. So can you go a little deeper then?
Well, like I said, we need to do both. I do not believe that the path to safety, more safety in Oakland is fewer police. Oakland, California already has the fewest officers per crime of any city in America. And that has been true the entire time that I've been the mayor. And right now we are at actually an all-time low in our staffing levels over the last decade. And I hear very strongly from my communities of color who are most impacted by violent crime that eliminating the police is not a path to safety at this time. Now, we believe in the ceasefire approach, which starts with respectful communication, the offering of services, life coaching, whatever that individual needs, and that enforcement is a last resort. But that last resort, we have found, is necessary to actually prevent further violence and especially the retaliatory cycle of violence. We can invest more in prevention and intervention without cutting the police staffing. We also know that exhausted police who are working too much overtime that aren't adequately staffed are more likely to make the types of mistakes that are unacceptable. So I have very strong feelings about that. I'm very clear about that in Oakland.
Sam?
Yeah, I want to give Libby some kudos for her courage on that, because I know that there was a lot of pressure, and I know particularly from the council, on just slashing the police budget. And, Libby has the fewest number of officers per crime of any city in the country. We have the fewest officers per capita of any big city in the country. We're both dealing with really, really thin departments. And I can tell you, in my everyday experiences going to community gatherings with Spanish-speaking moms in the Washington Guadalupe neighborhood, they are asking for patrols. They are not asking for fewer cops. They want good relationship with the police. Obviously, they want good policing. They have a right to constitutional policing, but they want police. And we're seeing that also in surveys nationally. It's a multicultural, multiracial supermajority of people who say, I'm really not interested in just slashing police because, frankly, safety is an issue and we do need police. That doesn't mean we can't be looking at alternatives, and we should be implementing them. And, when we lost 600 officers through pension reform and the battles of a decade ago, we started deploying community service officers. These were folks who didn't have guns or badges, who are there to respond to a lot of community concerns and help to build relationships and also take some of the workload off of police, frankly, so we could have cops focusing on responding to violent crime and the most serious kinds of crimes. So, I know that mayors throughout the country who have said no to defund, like me, end up with protesters on their front porch. And that's the reality of being a big city mayor. But I feel very strongly as well. It's not about just slashing the number of police officers if you're really trying to get to safety. And we know who is impacted the most when you have a real decline in safety in your community. It's overwhelmingly our neighbors who are lowest income and struggling the most.
Right. So we have about 10 to just under 15 minutes left. And I would love for both of you to talk to this audience. You've named a number of partnerships already with the private sector and things that you've been doing in your cities to really get your folks and get your residents out of this pandemic in an equitable way. If you could, point to a couple partnerships that you would want this audience to focus on right now that would help advance your cities, what would they be? So, and all the things you're doing, what, you're kind of your top two. So we only have, we're at 10:45, so only 15 minutes left. So.
I know this is excruciating for Libby because she has like 17 right now.
I know she's.
You know I'm not going to stick to just two. But
I know you're not. But maybe you rank order them. How about rank order?
I want to see you try, Libby. Go ahead.
No. You're like asking me to say which child is my favorite.
I know.
But listen, I touched on some opportunities already around the digital divide and around home key funding.
Right.
So I already put those out there, so those don't count against my two.
I don't. We have more.
I know Sam and I both agree that education is like the key to opportunity and the long-term key to closing the equity gap.
Right.
And so both of us have amazing college promise programs that are just showing just phenomenal impacts. In Oakland, we're literally giving babies. In fact, we just gave our 999th family a Brilliant Baby $500 college savings account, as well as financial coaching for the parents. And so sustaining that every year is key for us. And I am very close to closing my personal goal of creating a quasi-endowment to ensure that for the next quarter of a century, our children know that that money is sitting for them to make their college dreams a reality, regardless of their circumstances. The other interesting thing that we're doing is we are trying to create some technology platforms. One is called Assist Hub. You can visit assisthub.org, and it's trying to demystify and make much more accessible the public benefits that are out there. Millions of dollars in public benefits go unclaimed by people who are eligible, like the earned income tax credit. And so Assist Hub is really trying to close that gap and really utilize the resources that are there. Similarly, we're trying to launch a platform called TRIO, that stands for Teachers Rooted in Oakland, that would connect mission-minded landlords with particularly teachers of color who are teaching in the hardest to hire subjects, which for us are STEM and special ed, and discount their housing. We would help fill in a little bit of that gap. But we have got to attract and retain representative teachers. Studies show that particularly students of color have far better outcomes when their teaching staff reflects their identities. And we have a long ways to go in Oakland and the country to make that true. So that is TRIO. And then finally, of course, to take things like Keep Oakland Housed, to continue to evolve them. How does something like that potentially plug into guaranteed income? Oakland is piloting one of the largest demonstrations of guaranteed income in the country. 600 families currently receiving $500 a month, no strings attached. And we're studying it very rigorously because that is potentially a policy. We're also doing a slight variation on that called shallow subsidy, where again, we're just covering the housing costs for extremely low income people. And I believe, the policy permanent pathway for these pilots is to have a universal housing choice voucher. If you're poor, you don't have to enter the lottery to get food stamps or Medicare, but you do if you are poor and you need housing. Only 13% of eligible Californians who qualify for a housing choice voucher actually receive one. And I really want to commend the business community. The Bay Area Council Economic Institute has publicly supported a universal housing choice voucher. It can only be done at the federal level. That would be one of the most transformative policy changes we could get done over these next 2 years. It was part of Joe Biden's presidential platform. I believe that's something that we have got to focus on, particularly in the Bay Area. And last, Nicole.
Yes.
Pitch your idea to me.
Good.
We created something called the Oakland Fund for Public Innovation. It is a 501c3. It is literally designed to take your crazy idea with your funding, and we experiment it. We connect it with an internal champion within the city of Oakland that is part of that path to permanence and public sector institutionalization, and we try it out. So that's a mechanism we've created in Oakland. Pitch me your idea, and we will try it out.
Okay, over to you, Sam.
I knew she couldn't do it.
I know. I counted like 6. I counted 6.
All right, I'm going to cheat and give you 3. Okay, here we go. First, I mentioned our initiatives around reducing gun harm. We do have some one-time financial barriers, we think, to be able to get through what are some significant bureaucratic legal issues. And really grateful for the help of Heising Simons Foundation, Ron Conway, and others, and helping get this up and running. We're ready to take it to council and get it implemented. We just need a few more dollars. So certainly, we'd like to be the first jurisdiction in the country to require all gun owners to get insurance. And because let's face it, we all need insurance to drive a car. And that's a mechanism that dramatically reduces the risk of death in automobiles. So over the last several decades, we've seen innovations, everything from seatbelt mandates to airbags and so forth, driven in many ways by insurance companies who are saying you got to have it in your car. So we think that's important because we think that there are right now about 4.5 million gun owners in this country who are keeping their guns loaded in the presence of children unstored. And mandates from insurance companies to have gun safes and to have trigger locks and safe storage practices would be helpful. So anyway, that's one issue we think is particularly important. Secondly, I think that the scourge of homelessness we know is something that is going to be with us for far too long in the future. And we're all working fiercely on a lot of different innovations. We've had some great partnerships. I think about, for example, the Sandhill Foundation, Peter Powell, when he saw what we were doing with this quick build apartment approach around how we were able to just dramatically reduce the cost and the speed of building housing. He said, hey, we're all in. And he's been incredibly generous, more than $10 million in supporting the housing. We're now looking for more innovative ways to site this housing and to help the residents. So I know Peter is involved with us as well as others on looking at different ways. I know we've all been looking at, for example, Caltrans land, but there's a lot of land wasted around freeways that you would never expect to see housing built on. For example, in cloverleafs, where we think, engineers seem to think we could build safely and cleanly with the help of good air filters and walls and grade separated tunnels and so forth. And we just need some help in being able to figure out ways to better utilize this land, because land is the greatest constraint for all of us in getting more of this housing built.
Right.
And if we can do it safely, we'd love to have those one-time grants that can help us better able to figure out how to do this in new creative spaces and how to get our residents who are in these communities better on a pathway in terms of skills and education. And then finally, I'll go back to San Jose Aspires, because this is something I'm really passionate about. This is, of course, the Promise program to which Libby referred to, our version in San Jose. Both Libby and I are going to be kicked out of office. We have term limits. And we want our initiatives to live on, particularly where they are helping to support kids that we passionately believe in.
Right.
And in this case, in San Jose Aspires, we've got 1,100 students, actually more, who are going to benefit from this, that we're going to see through for 4 years at high school. We got funding to make sure that they'll have the money promised at the end of that time. But they're going to graduate well after I'm gone. Stanford University is studying this program to understand how is this impacting outcomes for these overwhelmingly low-income students who are students of color, and how is it helping them get into college and beyond. The problem is we need to make it sustainable, and we need help in thought leadership, partners from philanthropy and private sector figure out where does this live? How can this continue to live on? And how can we make it even more effective? How can this digital platform be more compelling than Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is kids are using right now in high schools? We want them addicted to this so they'll go to college and not to that.
Right.
No offense to Instagram and TikTok. Anyway.
Okay, so who do people contact? This is the final question. This one's easy, and then we're going to wrap up.
Call me.
So should they just reach out to both of your offices if they want to figure out how to partner?
Absolutely. You can email office of the mayor at oaklandca.gov and say, I heard the mayor speak at the Northern California Grant Makers. You can also call our office 510-238-3141. And, Nicole, I know you can.
Oh, yes.
I'm not quite, my staff would kill me if I actually gave my cell phone number out.
Yeah, you don't.
But
you know what? I'm going to go there, Libby. Everybody else has it. Why not?
Oh my gosh.
Text me 408-674-3952. It's fine. We'll make sure somebody gets that text. They actually can do something productive other than me.
What about an email? Do you have an email, Sam?
Yeah, I'll give my personal email. It gets me fast. sam.licardo@gmail.com. Very easy.
All right, I can give my personal email, Libby4Oakland, LIBBYFOR Oakland @gmail.com. You
There
can
you
email
go.
me there. That's my personal email.
This is why I love working with both of you, because you are, I mean, and for the audience, they are for real when they say to contact them. They really want the partnerships. They know how to use partners. They know how to leverage their city dollars, state and federal dollars with the private sector and with philanthropy. And they are willing to take the risks. Incredible leaders of their cities. And we are very fortunate to have both of them in our region. I want to thank you both for taking the time. Your plates are extremely full, leading your cities through so much right now. I am personally grateful for what each of you do every day. True public servants. And we, again,
Nicole,
yes.
Can I interrupt just to say thank
Sure.
you for your leadership and all you have done to help sustain us through this pandemic. The Community Foundation has been amazing, and we're grateful so much.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. And I've had the pleasure of seeing you through many different jobs, including in Oakland. And it's just, you are the right leader at the right time. And everyone, remember, public-private partnerships are the only thing that will change the world. I believe that.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you both so much.